Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Jackson from Cisco, and on behalf of Cisco and Data3, I'd like to welcome you to today's Juice IT event, Networking 2020, What Now, What Next? Clearly these are extraordinary times, and I'd firstly like to start out by offering our support. Cisco and Data3 are here to help you, help our communities, our customers, and our partners to operate virtually during these very difficult times. So whether you're looking to provide secure remote work for your workforce, whether you're looking to provide essential business services for contact centers, for supply chains or other critical business services, whether you're looking to support the amazing work of our healthcare workers through the provision of temporary medical facilities or hospitals, or whether you're looking to support the ongoing education of our children through remote learning, we have a number of programs, initiatives and offers to help. So please feel free to reach out to us. But moving on to today's discussion, what now, what next? Clearly, as we've been building for the last couple of years, we've been on a certain trajectory, and that trajectory has largely been informed by what's happening in the cloud space, what's happening in the mobility space. And largely that trajectory has put us in good stead for what's come about more recently. But if we look about how we prioritize, today's conversation is really about what are the right steps that we need to take right now around a number of areas so that we can support an overall architectural vision. So let's talk about architectures for the future. Cisco has been embarking on building a new architecture for this new cloud era for the past couple of years. And this is really what I want to talk to you about today. However, what I would say is that while we thought that in many cases we might have 6, 12, 18 months to build and embrace for these new architectures, the current crisis has shown that we need to move far more quickly. But in today's session, we'll talk about the smaller steps that you can take to get you to that bigger picture. So as we move to the architecture, I firstly want to point out a couple of characteristics or attributes of this architecture. So clearly, software-defined everything has been the rage for the past number of years. And what I'll say to you today is software-defined networks are old. What we're building through this new architecture is something that is built on top of software-defined networks, but builds far more business relevance, builds far more business continuance, and builds far more flexibility into the operational environment for the operators that need to build these more complex networks. Fundamentally, we call this shift from software-defined to this new generation intent-based networks. And Cisco has been building these intent-based networks, which largely tries to map the purpose of the network to the goal of the business. And specifically what we do here is we define the business intent of what we want the network to do. And that's defined in language that's relevant to our operators, to our users, and even to our business. And the network is then configured or configures itself in response to those business demands. So some examples that you might see here on the screen right now is, for example, defining a policy that says employees can access email from anywhere. Contractors can access internet, SaaS, or specific applications. Jailbroken devices can only access the internet. Or critical business apps get priority over SD-WAN. Now this is a far cry from the policies that we used to build inside our networks. The policies that we used to build inside our networks were largely based on technical constructs and specifically complex IP addresses. And those complex IP addresses were hard to manage, hard to scale, and we built these networks that we set and forget that didn't give us the flexibility to deal with the cloud era. So intent-based networking is the first critical step in this underlying architecture. However, this intent-based networking is something that must extend across the entire network domain. If we truly believe that applications are both hosted and consumed, we must have the intelligence and the policy that intent-based networking brings all the way from the applications to the users. And how we've been building this out is by building intent-based domains, if you will, from the data center domain through to the WAN domain or the software-defined WAN domain and to the user domain or the campus domain. And each of these domains has their own domain controller. And this domain controller is software-defined, it is intent-based. Where we're headed is where all of these domains fuse together into a single domain end-to-end, where we have a single multi-domain policy, which is driven by the business and is then translated by the relevant domain controllers into the specific requirements for that domain, programming, securing the network around those business requirements, and making sure there's a consistent and coherent policy across the end-to-end network to allow any user to connect to any WAN and to connect to any cloud. So let's bring this to life with 3 use cases. And these 3 use cases align with some of those priority use cases that we're seeing adopted by you, our customers, as you're dealing with the immediate crisis. The first one that I spoke about a little bit earlier was ensuring application experience as we move to a 100% digital economy away from a face-to-face environment. The second use case we're going to talk about is as you start to consume new applications, in particular SaaS-based applications or IaaS-based applications, how do you connect securely to multiple clouds while still assuring the experience of the applications from those clouds? And last but certainly not least, how do we enable worker mobility and homework in a way that is secure, but also allows us to prepare for the future, hopefully in just a few weeks' time when we all return back to our offices or have a hybrid working environment? How do we ensure that we have the right security model for the workplace, the workload, and the workforce? So we take these 3 use cases one by one, and we walk through how this new multi-domain architecture supports these individual use cases. So firstly, starting off with application assurance. I spoke a moment ago about this intent-based infrastructure, and I spoke about how this intent-based infrastructure is able to abstract the underlying technical details from the business requirements that an application might have on the network. Now, while the concept of elastic applications, controlling elastic infrastructures in the cloud is not something new, what we're trying to do here is bigger. What we're trying to do here is not just do this in the cloud or in a single cloud, but we're trying to do this across multiple clouds, doing this in a multi-cloud environment. And that's something that's far more challenging, but this is our value. As a non-cloud provider, Cisco's role is to provide the multi-cloud environment to give you the choice, the elasticity, the control, the security, the cost optimization across all of the clouds that you wish to consume, whether they be public-based clouds, SaaS-based clouds, or your own private cloud. This is what we're attempting to build out, but all of this must be informed by the application. But when we look at those applications, and specifically, the mix of applications that we have today, whether they are new cloud-native applications or applications that have been traditionally VM-based and are being ported, what we can say is that the application environment and the business transactions that happen between the components of the applications are very, very complicated. They don't sit in one place. They use many components from web front ends and the new generation of front ends through to traditional back ends, through the new generation of databases that might be cloud ready like Cassandra or MongoDB, or through to new functions or services that we avail as a function in a cloud. The mix, the type, the location of all of these application components are complex and they are changing. So to be able to untangle this starts off, first of all, with understanding the components, understanding where they are, and having the right level of visibility across those individual components. Once we understand them and we have the right level of visibility, we can then orchestrate them, we can assure them. So it starts at the application, it starts at understanding the application, and from there we can start to orchestrate the resources in response to that application. Once we agree that we're trying to build this across not only a single cloud, but across a number of clouds, we then have to extend this concept further. Not only are we looking at those application components, but we have to look at how those application components are connected. And this means connecting to the cloud and connecting within the clouds, as well as how those application components are secured. And specifically how we look at the workload management and the securitization of the individual workloads, as well as the security of the networks that sit below them. That means the segmentation, the micro-segmentation, as well as the workload, the payload security itself. And if we see this really as being top-down, we need to be able to drive the security layer and the networking layer under control in response of the application, and do this, as I said, across not only your own private data center or private cloud, not only across a single IaaS environment, but across multiple cloud environments. So how are we doing this? Well, I spoke a moment ago about it starts with visibility. Really, if we go back to the underlying premise here, that what we're trying to do is ensure this digital economy and ensure our digital businesses. The checks that we need to be putting on our applications are not checks around whether they have just the right amount of CPU or the right amount of RAM or the right heap size, but something a higher order than that. What we want to be able to do is look inside the business context of our applications and look at the individual transactions and the business that is flowing through our applications. Once we understand the business insights and we understand the transactions, the flows, the value of those flows, we can then map them to the application components. Which part of the application is responsible for managing that particular transaction? Is it an ERP system? Is it a database? Is it our identity and access? What's happening within the underlying application to support that business transaction? And then we move down from the application layer into the infrastructure layer. And this is where we want to take that giant network as a sensor we spoke about a moment ago and provide a lot of insights up to be able to give us a number of infrastructure insights. Is the network segmented the right way? Is the network performing the right way? From a security perspective, are the workloads secured the right way? Are there vulnerabilities in the workloads? From a hosting environment, do we have the right amount of compute in a particular cloud? Do we have the right amount of memory in a particular cloud, or likewise on a server? So we're gathering all of these insights right from the security layer, the network layer, the infrastructure layer, the application layer, and this business layer. And we're combining all of these. Now, these insights are gathered through a number of insight engines that we're building right across the network architecture. These network insight engines are things that you would know today as things like Tetration or StealthWatch or a network insight for resources, or the telemetry that we're gaining across the entire digital network architecture. And these insights are provided and married then together to give us the ability to make some new decisions. And this is where we're headed. Moving to the right-hand side of what we're seeing here, this is where we start to take all of this data that we've gathered and we use it for the concept of machine learning or artificial intelligence. As you would know, any successful machine learning operation is only as successful as the underlying data it has access to. So by focusing on creating these business insight layers right down to the application infrastructure and network infrastructure layers, we have a vast amount of data. We operate on this data using AI and machine learning, a cognitive engine, if you will, to allow us to make certain decisions. And these decisions can vary. They can be from determining the root cause analysis of a problem. They could be about scaling the resources in the right way and scaling the right resources. So for example, it may be very expensive just to scale up the amount of CPU or memory in a cloud, when all you might need to do is to scale the heap memory, for example. Having granular access to the individual components of an application and understanding the resource requirements of those individual components allows us to scale the right resources in a cost-effective way. Essentially what we're saying is, ultimately there's going to be a tight integration between the application experience and the infrastructure that goes underneath this. And this will be a symbiotic and closed-loop integration between both applications and infrastructure. And applications and infrastructure, not just in the context of a single cloud or a single data center or a single private cloud, but across this multi-cloud environment. More specifically, how we're enabling this is by bringing some of the components that you'd probably be familiar with as individual entities and joining them together. So from an application visibility perspective, moving AppDynamics far beyond application performance into being a cognition engine, an AI ops engine that's going to drive the entire underlying infrastructure. And through Cisco Intersight, which has been our cloud-based management thus far for our hyper-converged infrastructure, we're now scaling that to build in new functions, and these new AI ops capabilities will be delivered from a SaaS perspective through Cisco Intersight right across the entire infrastructure. So moving on now to the second use case. We've talked about managing connectivity within the cloud. We've talked about managing connectivity within the multi-cloud. Now let's extend that conversation to securing access between users and those clouds. I'm going to talk about a couple of specific use cases here. The first is for the applications themselves. We talked about the need for the individual components to communicate. They can reside in different places between data centers, between multiple clouds, and these need to be networked. Now, all of the clouds, whether they're public clouds today or SaaS, have some network constructs. They have the concepts of identity and access management, of firewalls, VPCs potentially, availability zones potentially. But what's different is that all of the individual cloud providers, because they need to differentiate themselves, they all do it slightly differently. And therefore, the constructs that you might use to build your secure, compliant networking inside Azure might differ from the networking constructs you build to build a secure, compliant network inside AWS. And with this comes complexity. And the onus will be on you to integrate your security policy, your network policy, with the policy for your infrastructure in AWS or your infrastructure in Azure. And this is difficult, and this is where errors start to creep in. This is where the human requirement to do this flies in the face of what we're trying to do, which is around automating these environments. So what we've done here is, by extending what you would know as ACI today into a software-based version of ACI that we call ACI Anywhere, and extending that intent-based construct and that simplified, abstracted way in which we build networks using contracts and extending them into the individual clouds themselves, abstracting the underlying complexities of the individual clouds from the operator. And this is something that we need to be able to do to be able to deliver on this promise of multi-cloud. And this is available today across a number of clouds, with more clouds coming. Once we have built the networks that can extend anywhere, we can then move our workloads onto any cloud securely. But that's just the networking within the cloud component itself, or between your private cloud and the public cloud. I said earlier that that's only looking at 50% of the problem. We need to look at how users consume clouds, and that's changing. So we've been delivering the integration between our software-defined WAN portfolio and the cloud environments now for about 12 to 18 months. What we've recently announced is a number of enhancements to these extensions. So specifically within the Office 365 environment, within SaaS, the SaaS environments, what we delivered last year was the ability to be able to have application awareness, application-aware routing, and application assurance to improve the performance of Office 365 by up to 40% when accessed via an SD-WAN environment. We've extended this capability now this year by working with Microsoft to get more granular, breaking down the individual components of Office 365 into, say, SharePoint or Outlook or Teams or whatever the individual components are, and giving them the right level of assurance. And as part of this, a comprehensive exchange of telemetry between the Microsoft environment and the Cisco SD-WAN environment. Moving on now to the final use case. And the final use case is probably, or arguably, the most critical use case, because this is all about security. If we look at the environment that we described earlier, the change in the cloud environment on one side and the change in the user consumption on the other side, it's clear that in both of those environments, we've moved beyond our traditional perimeter. Our traditional perimeters were whitelist based. They relied on excessive trust. They worked on the assumption that everything inside our perimeter was trusted, and we needed to do very little from a security perspective for those trusted devices. All we needed to do was to provide security for the untrusted devices. Essentially, this is what our model looked like. It was a model that was purely based on whitelist, with just security controls for those corner cases, for those untrusted devices. The zero trust model turns this on its head. The zero trust model relies on, or is underpinned by, a complete change in philosophy, that we trust nothing. From the outset, we trust nothing. And the trust must be earned, trust must be continuously verified, and trust must be assured at all points across the network. So we move from this world of assuming zero trust into then, on a case-by-case basis, providing and assuring the trust as required. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to establish trust. And we need to establish trust for users, for wide area networks, for applications, for clouds. And once this trust has been established, we will allow a certain number of trust-based connections, and we enforce the trust-based access. So we will allow a particular user to access a particular application in a particular cloud, or allow an IoT device to access only a particular IoT controller, perhaps in a DMZ or perhaps in a particular IoT cloud. But this granular-based access is enforced on an individual transaction, flow, or communication basis. To make this simple, we go back to where we started and the importance of policy. If we want to be able to scale this, we need to be able to do a couple of things. Or if we want to be able to implement Zero Trust more broadly, we need to be able to implement it right across the entire network. And we need to simplify how it's actually implemented across the entire network. And this is where the policy that we spoke about earlier, this access policy defined in human or in business terms, that says this application is allowed serve data to this particular user, or this user, because they have a jailbroken device, is only allowed access this particular application. This becomes the heart of the policy that we will use to inform the underlying zero trust model and to really abstract the complexity of that underlying zero trust model. What we're trying to do is to be able to deliver this policy right across the entire spectrum, from any user to any application in any cloud, and therefore we need to have this zero trust model extended from the workforce or any user right through to the workload, any cloud, and any premise, any building, any workplace, any branch in between. And this is the extent of our zero trust architecture, is right across this entire workforce, workplace, and workload. So these are examples of the end-to-end security architecture infrastructure. But there are more simple ways to start and arguably more pressing ways to start. Building secure remote access for your workforce, for your customers' workforces, is a high priority requirement right now. But taking many of the concepts that we've spoken about, from Duo providing multi-factor authentication, from Cisco Umbrella providing that secure cloud-based security edge, and integrating it potentially with SD-WAN, integrating it with AnyConnect or ASAV, for those of you who want to build VPNs, either VPNs to physical concentrators or scalable VPNs in the cloud. And all of this augmented with anti-malware protection. We have a number of offers available to you. These offers are both commercial offers as well as capability offers. So for existing customers, we have some offers around free expansion of your scale, an expansion of your capacity, an extension of your licenses. For new customers, we have a number of packages to give you free access for a period to give you the ability to build out to your immediate requirements. Likewise, on the Meraki side, for those of you who are looking at that lean full stack environment, we also have a number of offers there, whether there are offers, free trials around insights and promotions around MX security or remote office worker and bundles. We have a number of offers there to get you off the ground more and more quickly, to help you build this zero trust model immediately. Make no mistake that over the past couple of months, the entire focus of the hacking community has been redirected towards the remote workforce. Their belief system is that the data center is secure, the campus is secure, the branch office is secure, the remote office is not secure. And there have been a number of high visibility attacks on remote workers. So ensuring that you're building remote workers in the right way with a zero-based architecture is something that we augment or offer both through our offers as well as through services and validated designs to help you get there more quickly. But in terms of wrapping up, they say never let a good crisis go to waste. What has this crisis taught us? The crisis has taught us firstly that it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how fast you are, if it isn't secure, it doesn't matter. We've seen some SaaS-based darlings of the crisis be relegated to villains within a day or two as high-profile security vulnerabilities came to light. We've seen the importance of speed and the importance of the adoption of SaaS-based services, whether it be schools accessing cloud-based education systems or your workforce accessing cloud-based applications, the ability to move quickly to be able to deliver SaaS-based applications or IaaS-based applications more and more quickly has been really, really important, but it has been difficult in many cases to implement this under the right level of policy control. And therefore, the importance of building this intent-based policy and the ability that this gives you to move more quickly and more compliantly is essential to be able to move at speed, but moving securely. And finally, around scale, whether we talk about monolithic applications and their inability to scale, or monolithic architectures and their inability to scale, what's become clear is that we need to move towards this new world where we have elastic applications sitting across one or many clouds. These applications will no longer be monolithic, but neither will the underlying architectures that underpin them. Moving from these, the new network architecture must be a hybrid architecture that extends from your users across multiple SD-WAN environments, multiple hosting environments, whether they be your on-prem data center or multiple clouds. So in terms of what you need to do today, your priorities will be defined by your organization and what you're doing in service of your workers or your customers. But what we essentially see as an easier, simple pathway is over the next 30 days, build out that zero trust model to secure your workforce. Avail of those offers, those services, those bundles, those validated designs to build your remote workforce to help you to continue to operate in this new normal. But this new normal over the next 60 days is going to evolve. We hope within 60 days, many of us might start to get back into the office environment. And we're going to see our traffic profile changing. So we're going to need to build new software-defined WAN environments to build more flexible consumption of cloud-based applications, of SaaS-based applications. Build out the right cloud access, but building in that secure edge through Umbrella, through that secure edge services gateway. This will then allow you to not only give you access to the cloud, but secure that access to the cloud. And finally then, look at your bigger picture. Look at how you're going to scale your digital applications. Look at how you're going to gain the visibility inside those applications to be able to not only give you the business insights around how they map to the profitability and the business that's moving through those applications, but how they can drive the infrastructure in response, whether that infrastructure, as I mentioned, be on-prem or whether that be in cloud. Ultimately, we believe that we've addressed all of the requirements to achieve these goals, not only in the short term through our architecture, but that this architecture is going to continue to evolve. These integrations will continue to, we'll build out more and more of these integrations, and we'll build out this entire multi-domain architecture in service of any user across any WAN to any application in any cloud. So thank you for listening to me today. Both Cisco and Data3 are here at your service. Please reach out to us, and thank you again for your time. Thank you.